Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. R. Kelly's trial is back in session with striking testimony from more accusers. Why some are speaking out for the first time, saying the singer used his studio as a place to sexually assault them.
Susan posed a threat to him.
The prosecution ramps up in the closing arguments in Robert Durst's trial. We'll take you through jury instructions and hear from state prosecutors who detail Durst's alleged history with lying. More delays in the case of the Doomsday duo, how the trials of Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell have been pushed off even further. But first, Day 2 of the landmark trial against Elizabeth Holmes continues.
I think she believes that she is the best possible advocate for herself and her business and hear her case.
Law and Crime's top analysts break down opening statements and explain what we could see in what's expected to be a lengthy trial. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Thursday marks Day 2 for the highly anticipated trial of Elizabeth Holmes, former Theranos CEO. Opening statements began on Wednesday as the prosecution painted Holmes as a manipulative fraud and a cheat, while the defense framed her as a hard-working startup executive who faced unprecedented challenges. Back in 2003, a 19-year-old Holmes founded the now-defunct Theranos, a company she says was aimed at revolutionizing blood testing. During its run, she convinced investors to donate $700 million to the company. Later, investigators revealed the technology had serious issues. The Stanford University dropout is now charged with 10 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. If convicted, 37-year-old Holmes could face up to 2 decades in prison. In documents filed ahead of the trial, Holmes has put the blame on Ramesh Sunny Belwani, her ex-boyfriend and former Theranos executive. Holmes' defense argued Belwani manipulated and abused her. In what's expected to be a 13-week trial, legal experts say Holmes' defense will have to pay close attention to this jury.
How does her body language and tone of voice change? We know that she had a very distinctive, and some say put on or fake tone of voice with her investors. If she testifies, and I believe she will, how does she sound? All of these things are going to be very interesting. In order to win here, she has to see things from her jury's perspective and then tell a story that resonates with that perspective. It's a little bit harder when they vary so widely.
Joining us today is legal analyst Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Dina, with the defense not mentioning the abuse in their opening statements, only that Belwani had a temper, was that surprising to you considering Holmes' motions to the court?
It was a little bit surprising because they said in the filing that they were going to allude to this. But it was smart because if you say something in opening statement, you had better back it up with proof. So that doesn't necessarily mean they won't end up introducing evidence to the abuse, but it gives them the leeway because most likely she would have to take the stand if they do want to approve some sort of abuse happen. And she probably doesn't know yet if she wants to take the stand. So instead, they kind of led with the fact that she was being overly influenced by him. He was much older and that she's making mistakes and not malice. So they kind of alluded to the fact that he, had something to do with it without going as far as alleging the abuse.
Yeah, that might be a game time decision depending on how the testimony comes in, and that's in large part as to the witnesses. Terry, the prosecution's witness list has some huge names like ex-Theranos board members, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and former Defense Secretary James Mattis. Should we expect them to be testifying?
I do think there's a good chance that we are going to see some of those witnesses. There are 180 names on the government's list, including Kissinger and Mattis. And there's some other big names like Murdoch, the media mogul, and also David Boies, who's this prominent attorney. So we might see some of them. They may try to quash a subpoena if they're subpoenaed. And if that's the case, they're going to have to show that the subpoena is unreasonable and oppressive. So we'll see if they argue against it.
Yeah, it's one of those times I really, really wish we had cameras in federal courts, because imagine being able to see Defense Secretary get cross-examined about a Theranos CEO case. That would be huge, but of course, we can't do that in federal courts. Thank you both. We turn now to an update from the so-called Doomsday duo, now stalling in the trials of Chad Daybell and his wife, Lori Vallow Daybell. Both are charged with the murders of Lori's 2 children, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Both kids disappeared in September 2019, and their bodies were discovered buried in Chad Daybell's backyard in June of the following year. In a ruling made Wednesday, a judge determined Lori Vallow is still not competent to participate in her own court proceedings. This comes after she was committed to the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare back in June, when a mental health professional determined she wasn't fit for trial. On Wednesday, Judge Stephen Boyce ruled her hospital stay would continue for another 180 days. Meantime, Chad Daybell's trial date will be pushed back again after a motion was filed to change the trial's venue, and Daybell waived the right to a speedy trial.
Really, it would be impractical to try to commence this case 2 months from today on November 8th. I understand there may also be some discovery issues that are not yet completed. So the court really on its own motion feels like it's probably appropriate to continue this trial. And so that's where I think we're headed.
The change of venue hearing is set for early next month. Prosecutors say they plan to seek the death penalty for Chad Daybell if he's convicted. New information into our newsroom as NXIVM co-founder and president Nancy Salzman is sentenced to 3.5 years behind bars for racketeering conspiracy. You may remember Salzman from her work with cult leader Keith Raniere in the NXIVM organization, made famous in the HBO documentary The Vow. Raniere and Salzman purported NXIVM as a self-help organization, but really used it as a front to coerce women to have sex with Raniere, create a secret society, and even brand themselves. Raniere and Salzman were arrested in 2018, and Salzman pled guilty to her charges the following year. In October 2020, Raniere was sentenced to life in prison. A Florida man is charged with first-degree murder in the death of a 23-year-old mother he tells authorities was having an intimate relationship with, all while dating her mother at the same time. It's a twisted web of relationships for 45-year-old Eric Westergaard, who was charged with first-degree murder on Monday. This comes after 23-year-old Perrin Damron's body was found in the Okeechobee Waterway Canal on Sunday. Westergaard told officials he was dating Damron's mother, but having an affair with the victim at the same time. Westergaard told police he had been smoking marijuana with Damron on Saturday when she fell to cut her head. He then gathered garbage bags, tape, rope, and a cinder block to weigh her body down in a nearby canal. Westergaard is being held in jail without bond. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, closing arguments continue in the trial of California versus Robert Durst. We'll hear from the prosecution who doubled down on Durst's motivation to kill Susan Berman. But first, the trial of R. Kelly is back in session as more accusers take the stand. Their shocking claims of sexual assault, some saying they were locked inside the singer's studio for days on end.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. After 3 days off, the R. Kelly trial was back in session with two more uncharged accusers testifying against the disgraced king of R&B. One woman identified only as Sonia told the jury she interviewed R. Kelly in 2003 when she was a 21-year-old intern at a Salt Lake City radio station. Sonia testified that when she arrived, she waited in a room for 3 to 4 days without food or water. And when she finally got something to eat, she became extremely full and tired. When she awoke, she saw Kelly doing up his pants and her underwear resting on an armchair. As Sonia left, one of R. Kelly's associates made her sign an NDA and told her not to tell anyone what happened and that she did not want to mess with R. Kelly. Her testimony was the first time she spoke about what happened publicly, something the defense grilled her about. Another accuser, Anna, also testified, saying that she first met R. Kelly backstage at a South Carolina concert when she was 19 years old. They exchanged numbers at a meet and greet with her mother there. Months later, she saw Kelly at his Atlanta home. The relationship soon became sexual, and before it ended in December 2018, she would travel to concerts to see him to North Carolina, New York, Arizona, and California. Anna also confirmed that there were strict rules for Kelly's girlfriends: no makeup, wear baggy clothes, and needing permission to go out. And if they broke them, there were harsh punishments. Next, prosecutors brought up previous text messages that Anna says she was forced to send by R. Kelly, saying that she was recorded being spanked and told to send a text that she liked it when she did not. Let's bring back legal analyst Dina Dahl and co-host Terry Yawson to break down this testimony. Terry, how does it work when you have uncharged accusers and charged accusers? What is the jury supposed to do with their testimony?
You know what, Brian? I don't think that they are as concerned about whether or not this particular individual is charging. I think they're going to look at each of these witnesses and determine how credible they are. The Sonia witness who testified that she was in a room locked up for 3 days, that seems incredible, but it depends on how the jury perceived her testimony. She said she ate this Chinese food, that she felt tired, that she felt groggy. And, the point is she's saying she was drugged. It all really depends on how she comes across and whether or not they believe her. And I think the fact that this happened in 2003, this is the first time she's testifying, they may just hold that against her.
Yeah, possibly. Dina, reasonable doubt for the defense can often be swayed by the number of victims. Could this be one too many accusers for the defense to argue these accusers are all wrong or exaggerating?
Absolutely. It changes the dynamic from a he said, she said to he said, they said. The more people who have the similar story, and they do, the controlling nature, the punishment, the forcing to send messages, the more likely the jury will find the witnesses who are being charged, he is being charged with that crime, credible. And that's very important. And it really may be one too many.
Yeah, this really is he said, she said, she said, she said, she said, she said, as it continues with more and more testimony. Thank you both. We turn now to Ohio, where Stanley Ford is accused of setting 3 fires in his Akron neighborhood. Stanley Ford is accused of killing 9 people in 2 deadly house fires. He's also accused of setting fire to a parked car where no one was harmed. If convicted, Stanley Ford could face the death penalty. On the stand is retired detective Tanisha Stewart, who was the lead detective on the case back in 2017. Detective Stewart withstood a tough cross-examination where the defense attorney, Joe Gorman, revealed some holes in her investigation that revealed a suspect's alibi wasn't thoroughly investigated.
Did you ever speak to Gloria Lee?
I did not.
Do you know if anybody spoke to Gloria Lee?
I can't recall off the top of my head if they spoke to her or not, but it was not sufficient to my liking.
Where is the action taken, or where in your report of investigation does it say the video at that apartment complex was viewed by somebody to determine whether he was there or not?
It's not written in my report.
Was it ever done?
At this late date, I can't say. Absolutely someone did go and check that out, but at this late day, I can't tell you what their findings were. But whatever they were, if I didn't write in my report, I solidified this, then it wasn't there to my liking.
On redirect, the state asked her what brought her to the conclusion that Ford undoubtedly set those fires.
However, you have a commonality between the two, and that's one person. Why in 2 separate fires are these 2 sets of people running to Mr. Ford's mother's house, getting access, cutting on the same light inside, using the same alarm codes to access and 2 totally sets of different family members. What's the commonality? The commonality is Mr. Ford thought that they were horrible people.
Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, the trial of Robert Durst continues as closing arguments stretch into their 2nd day. Ahead of jury deliberation, we bring you the specific jury instructions as the 12 jurors decide Durst's fate. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Closing arguments are underway in Robert Durst's trial. Before hearing them, the judge read instructions to the jury. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy tells us what exactly are in those instructions.
Jury instructions can be tedious, but they're very important. They're essentially a roadmap for the jurors to follow while they're deliberating.
You must not let bias, sympathy, prejudice, or public opinion influence your assessment of the evidence.
Parts of the jury instructions read by Judge Mark Wyndham in Robert Durst's trial are pretty standard.
The people are not required to prove that the defendant had a motive to commit the crime charged.
But there are some things that are different that the jury will have to consider when weighing Robert Durst's fate.
The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder if the people have proved that the defendant murdered while lying in wait.
Meaning the jury has to find Durst concealed his purpose or had a secret plan. The instructions include special circumstances to the murder, including that Durst intended to kill Susan Berman.
2, Susan Berman was a witness to a crime. 3, the killing was not committed during the commission of the crime to which Susan Berman was a witness. And 4, the defendant intended that Susan Berman be killed to prevent her from testifying in a criminal proceeding.
The prosecution must also prove Durst used a firearm intentionally to find him guilty of first-degree murder and that it caused Berman's death.
However, evidence that the defendant fled cannot prove guilt by itself.
Closing arguments will last for several days, but just how long the jury deliberates, that's completely up to them. For Law and Crime Daily, I'm Anjanette Levy.
Thanks, Anjanette. After the break, we'll bring you back into the courtroom for Durst's closing arguments, how the prosecution's hammering down on Durst's motive, and recounts his past track record of lying on the record. On to the West Coast, where closing arguments are underway in the California v. Robert Durst trial. Durst, a real estate heir from New York, is on trial from the 2000 murder of his best friend, Susan Berman. Durst claims he discovered Berman's body in her Benedict Canyon home, panicked, and left the scene. He later admitted to sending the infamous cadaver note to help lead officers to her body. Durst is accused of murdering Berman because she had information about his wife, Kathy, who went missing in 1982. Though a body has never been found, Durst is also suspected of her murder. After 4 months of lengthy testimony, closing arguments began on Wednesday, with the prosecution's team splitting arguments between them. Delivering their statements to the jury, prosecutors emphasized Durst's tendency to lie.
He raised his hand and he took an oath to tell the truth to all of you. That's a solemn oath. It's a solemn promise. It's the cornerstone of our system of justice. As jurors, you rely on witnesses. You rely on evidence. Not prejudice, not conjecture, not passion. You rely on evidence, and you rely on what these people tell you. And that's why they take an oath.
Would you lie under oath to help your case?
Yes. We know otherwise now, what he thinks of that oath. He sat here, he raised his hand, he swore to tell the truth, and then he proceeded to admit to you that he would lie under oath.
The state then delved into what they believe were Berman's real motives in being Durst's spokesperson, and why they made her a threat to the real estate heir.
So what did Susan do as the spokesperson? Was she acting in an endeavor to help find his missing wife? To help him deal with his grief? Was this a coordinated attack on Kathy so that the police would be distracted and go in a different direction? It wasn't about right or wrong, it was just about loyalty. That's who Susan was. Was it to find Kathy? Was that her goal and how she was actually acting? Or was it to help her friend out of this mess? Susan posed a threat to him. To Janine Pirro, who he feared was going to indict him, and he killed her because she was a witness. To silence her, to stop her from ever taking that stand, stop her from ever talking to the police.
Another threat to Robert Durst was Kathy's best friend, Gilberta Namaji, who the prosecution is claiming could have been next on Durst's hit list because she kept pointing the finger at him.
He knew Gilberta was a threat. And so what does he do? He's got her address in his car during this period of time when he knows she's a threat and he's on the run. He has her phone number. He has a map to the county where she lives, which would lead him right to that address. He's got not one, but 2 guns. 2. Along with that note. He's got 80 rounds of ammunition. He wants you to believe that was to commit suicide? Come on, use your common sense.
Dina, the prosecution in California gets to rebut the defense's closing arguments, and Lewin will be doing it. What should we expect from that rebuttal summation that we didn't see in this first one?
You know, in his closing argument, the prosecutor says that Robert Durst's testimony was similar to a cockroach soup because of all the lies. And, you know, Robert Durst did manage to kind of take control of his cross-examination in a way that did muddy the waters. The defense attorney, when he gets up, is going to try to muddy the waters even more. What the prosecution needs to do is we have 4 months of testimony here, and the defense attorney may muddy it pretty well. He will need to simplify and clarify the testimony and all the evidence in a way for the jury to be able to make this decision in favor of what the prosecution wants.
Yeah, interesting point, Dina. Terry, let's piggyback off of that. Are you seeing any reasonable doubt from the defense that the prosecution may not have answered in their summation?
Brian, I do not see any reasonable doubt in this case at all. I don't think the jury is going to see any reasonable doubt. The prosecution has done a great job lying out all of the evidence in front of this jury. The only thing I think the defense can do is, to Dina's point, clarify their position. And one of the things they will probably try to say is, this is all circumstantial. We don't have any evidence. And in fact, Durst was not charged with Kathy's disappearance. He wasn't convicted of murder as far as Morris Black was concerned. And so there's no motive. And so my client is innocent. I don't think it'll work.
Interesting argument. We'll see how it plays out. Thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.